The dining room smelled like roast chicken and fresh flowers. Candles flickered on the long table. Everyone was dressed up nice. It was supposed to be a happy night. It wasn't. Sarah Williams stood in the doorway holding a homemade apple pie. She had baked it that morning, the way her mother taught her years ago. She thought it might make Barbara smile, just once. She was wrong. Barbara sat at the head of the table like a queen. Silver hair done up, pearls around her neck, 2 empty wine glasses in front of her and a third half full. Her eyes moved slowly to Sarah, and her mouth curled into something that only looked like a smile. "Oh," Barbara said, "you brought a pie." The table went quiet. "Sarah made it herself," said Michael, Sarah's husband, trying to keep things light. "Smells great, huh, Mom?" Barbara didn't answer him. She kept staring at Sarah. And then she said it. Loud, clear, so the whole family could hear. "You know," Barbara said, "you can take the girl out of the trash, but you can't take the trash out of the girl." Nobody moved. Forks stopped in the air. Sarah's sister-in-law looked down at her plate. An uncle coughed into his napkin. Somewhere a clock ticked, and it was the only sound in the room. Sarah just stood there, holding that warm pie in her 2 hands. Now, most people would have cried, or screamed, or thrown that pie right across the table. And honestly, nobody would have blamed her. But Sarah did none of that. She walked to the counter. She set the pie down, slow and gentle. Then she turned around and she smiled, a soft, quiet smile. "It's got cinnamon in it," she said, "Michael's favorite." And she sat down. That was it. No fight, no tears. She just sat down and passed the potatoes. Now, if you're watching this, I want you to stop for 1 second and think. If somebody said that about you, in front of your whole family, on a night that was supposed to be special, what would you have done? Type it below. I really do want to know. Because what Sarah did next is not what you'd expect. She said nothing at all. See, this wasn't the first time Barbara had done something like this. Sarah had been married to Michael for 8 years. 8 long years. And in all that time, Barbara had never once made her feel welcome. At the wedding, Barbara wore black. Everybody noticed. She told the relatives Sarah trapped her son. She forgot to put Sarah in the family Christmas photo, 2 years in a row. She had a way of saying cruel things and calling them jokes. "Oh, don't be so sensitive, honey, I'm only teasing." But this? Calling her trash, out loud, at the dinner table? This was new. This was the worst it had ever been. And still, Sarah stayed calm. Michael leaned over to her later in the hallway and whispered, "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'll talk to her, I promise." Sarah just touched his arm. "It's okay," she said. "Don't make a scene. Not tonight." But it wasn't okay, and Michael knew it. He could see it in her eyes. That quiet, tired look. The look of someone who had been swallowing her pain for a very long time. Here's what nobody at that table knew. Not the uncle, not the cousins, not even Michael, not really. Nobody knew what Sarah actually did for a living. They knew she worked downtown somewhere. They knew she left early and came home late. They knew she wore nice suits and carried a leather bag. But in 8 years, not one of them had ever asked her a single real question about her job. Why would they? Barbara had already decided who Sarah was. A poor girl from a small town. A nobody who married up. Trash, she called her. And when Barbara decided something, the whole family just went along with it. So they never asked. And Sarah never told. Because here's the thing about Sarah. She grew up with almost nothing. Her father worked with his hands his whole life, and he taught her one rule she never forgot. "Don't tell people who you are," he used to say. "Show them. Let your actions do the talking. The loud ones are always the emptiest." So Sarah stayed quiet. She let Barbara talk. She let the whole family believe whatever they wanted to believe. But quiet is not the same as weak. And that night, driving home in the dark, something in Sarah finally shifted. Michael was asleep in the passenger seat. The road was empty. The heater hummed. And Sarah kept both hands on the wheel and stared straight ahead, thinking about her father. Thinking about all those years of little cuts. The black dress, the missing photos, the funeral Barbara skipped because she had a hair appointment. Sarah's eyes stung, but she didn't cry, because deep down she knew something Barbara didn't, something that was about to change everything. At a red light, her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She glanced down. It was a text from her assistant, just one line. "It's official. The papers are signed. We close Monday." Sarah read it twice, and then, for the first time all night, she smiled. Not a soft, polite smile, a real one, small and quiet and sure. The light turned green. She set the phone back down and drove on into the dark. Now, you're probably wondering, what papers? What closes on Monday? What could a poor girl from a small town possibly have signed that would matter? That's the part nobody saw coming. Because in just 3 days, Barbara was going to get dressed up in her very best clothes. She was going to drive to work, the same job she'd bragged about for 25 years. The job she thought made her better than everyone, better than Sarah. And she was going to walk into a room. And sitting at the head of that room, at the head of the table, the way Barbara loved to sit, was going to be a face she never, ever expected to see. The face of the woman she called trash. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because to really understand what happened next, to understand just how far this goes, and why Sarah waited 8 long years to let it all come out, you have to understand what Barbara did to her over those years. The things nobody talked about. The things that finally pushed a gentle woman to the edge. And there's one thing Barbara did. One cruel, unforgivable thing that Sarah never told a single soul. Not even Michael. We'll get to that. But for now, just remember this. Sarah smiled in that car for a reason. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't hurt anymore. She was ready. And Barbara had no idea what was coming. That's where we'll pick it up. Because what Barbara did over those 8 years, and what Sarah found hidden in a stack of company files just 2 days later, is the part of this story that changes everything. If you want to see how a quiet, kind woman finally got the justice she deserved, go ahead and subscribe. You are not going to want to miss what happens Monday morning. To understand that quiet smile in the car, you have to go back, way back, before the dinner, before the pie, before Barbara ever said that terrible word. Because Barbara didn't wake up one morning and decide to be cruel. She'd been cruel to Sarah for years. It started the very first day Michael brought Sarah home. Sarah was nervous. She'd baked cookies. She wore her nicest dress, the blue one she saved for church. She walked into that house with her heart in her hands, hoping this family would love her. Barbara looked her up and down, one slow look, head to toe, and then she turned to Michael and said, "Well, she's not what I pictured." That was it. That was hello. Sarah stood there holding those cookies, and nobody ever ate a single one. Now, some people might say, "Come on, that's just a rude comment, let it go." And maybe, by itself, it was small. But that's how it works, isn't it? It's never one big thing. It's 100 small cuts. And each one, by itself, seems too little to cry about. So you don't. You just take it. And you take it. And you take it. Until one day you look up and realize you've been bleeding for years. That was Sarah's life with Barbara. At the wedding, Barbara wore black, full black, like she was going to a funeral instead of her only son's wedding. When people asked about it, she just smiled and said, "Oh, I'm mourning the life he could have had." Sarah heard her say it. Sarah smiled anyway. She didn't want to ruin Michael's day. Then came the Christmas photos. Every year, Barbara had a big family portrait taken. The whole family, matching sweaters, the works. And 2 years in a row, somehow, Sarah wasn't in it. "Oh, honey, we started without you," Barbara would say. "You were in the kitchen. You didn't mind, did you?" Sarah minded. Of course she minded. But she just nodded and kept washing the dishes. Barbara's dishes. In Barbara's kitchen. At a party where Sarah did most of the cooking and got none of the thanks. And here's the part that really gets you. Barbara loved to talk about her job. Oh, she loved it. 25 years at a big company downtown, Meridian Office Group. She was the office manager, and to hear her tell it, she practically ran the whole place. "They can't function without me," she'd say at every dinner. "I'm the one who keeps that whole company standing." She'd look right at Sarah when she said it, like a little jab, like, "Look at me. I'm important. I matter. What do you even do all day?" And Sarah would just quietly sip her water and say nothing, because Sarah never bragged, ever. It wasn't in her. But Barbara took that silence as proof. Proof that Sarah was nobody. Proof that she'd been right all along. A working girl, she called her, like it was something dirty. Some little job downtown, probably answers phones. The family laughed along. They always laughed along. And Sarah? She'd help clear the table. Now, here's where it stops being just mean and starts being something you can't forgive. Sarah's father died 4 years ago. He was the one who raised her, the one who taught her to work hard and stay humble, the one who told her to let her actions do the talking. He was her whole world, and when he passed, Sarah was shattered. The funeral was on a Saturday, a small church, an hour outside the city. Sarah asked the family to come. She needed them there. She needed Michael's family to stand beside her just this once. Barbara didn't come. She had a hair appointment. A hair appointment. On the day Sarah buried her father. "I booked it months ago, honey," Barbara said on the phone, like that explained anything. "You understand, funerals are so gloomy anyway." Sarah stood in that church at her own father's funeral and looked at the empty seats where Michael's family should have been. Michael came, bless him, but his mother, his sisters, they followed Barbara's lead. They stayed home. And Sarah stood there alone with her grief. She never forgot that. She never talked about it. But she never, ever forgot. If you've ever had someone treat you like you don't matter during the worst moment of your life, you know that kind of pain doesn't leave. It just goes quiet. It waits. Take a second. If you've been there, drop a heart in the comments. Sometimes it just helps to know you're not the only one who's felt that. Because Sarah felt it every single day. And still, she stayed. She stayed for Michael. Because she loved him, and because he was kind, and because he wasn't his mother. Michael was gentle. He just had one weakness. He couldn't stand up to Barbara. Never could. She'd raised him to always give in, and old habits are hard to break. So Sarah protected him. She kept the peace. She swallowed her pain so he wouldn't have to choose between his wife and his mother. But lately, something had changed. Barbara had gotten nervous. At the last few dinners, she'd stopped bragging quite so much about her precious company. Instead, she'd started to worry out loud. "Things are changing at work," she said one night, frowning into her wine. "There's talk of new owners, some big company buying us out. I don't like it one bit." She said it like a complaint, like an inconvenience. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea what those words really meant, or who was really behind them. Sitting right across the table, quiet as ever, Sarah heard every word. And she didn't say a thing. She just folded her napkin, nice and neat, and looked down at her plate to hide her face. Because Sarah knew exactly which company was buying Meridian Office Group. She knew the name on those papers. She knew the person signing them. And it was the last person on earth Barbara would ever have guessed. That night, driving home, this was a few weeks before the pie, before the word trash, Michael reached over and took Sarah's hand at a stoplight. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Why do you let her talk to you like that? All these years. You never fight back. You never even get mad." He looked at her. "You could stop it, anytime you wanted. I don't know why, but I always feel like you could stop it, like you're holding something back." Sarah looked out the window. The streetlights slid across her face, and she said something Michael didn't understand. "Not yet," she said softly. "Not yet." Michael waited for more, but there wasn't any more. Sarah just squeezed his hand and looked out at the road. Not yet. 2 little words, but there was a whole world behind them, a plan, a secret, a truth that had been sitting quiet inside Sarah for 8 long years, waiting for the right moment to finally come out. And that moment was almost here. Because in just a few short weeks, Barbara would say the word trash at that dinner table. And 2 days after that, Sarah would sit down at her desk, open a stack of company files, files about her new company, and the people who worked there, and she would find something about Barbara, something so bad, so hidden, that it would turn this whole story upside down. And Sarah would realize the woman who called her trash had a very dark secret of her own. That secret, what Sarah found in those files, is where everything changes. That's next. Stick with me, because once you see what Barbara was really hiding, you'll understand exactly why Sarah waited so long. Subscribe so you don't miss it. But before we get to those files, something happened that almost stopped the whole story before it started. Because there was one night, just one, when Sarah almost walked away from all of it. From Michael, from the marriage, from the plan she'd been holding on to for so long. And it was Barbara who pushed her there. It started about a week after the dinner with the pie, the dinner with that word. Barbara wasn't done. If anything, she was just getting warmed up. See, something about Sarah's calm that night had bothered her. Barbara expected tears. She expected a fight. And when Sarah just smiled and passed the potatoes, it got under Barbara's skin. It scared her a little, though she'd never admit it. So Barbara went to work on the one weak spot she could find. Michael. She started calling him. Not once, every day. Little phone calls, dropped in like poison. "Michael, honey, can I ask you something? Do you really know your wife? I mean, really know her?" "Mom, don't start. I'm just saying, a woman who won't talk about her job, who's so secretive, in my day, that meant something. That meant she was hiding something." A pause. "Have you ever seen a real paycheck? Do you even know what she does all day?" And here's the terrible part. It worked. Slowly, a little at a time, just like the small cuts. Michael was a good man, but Barbara had raised him, and he'd spent his whole life believing her. And now these little questions started to sit in his mind, started to itch. He'd watch Sarah leave for work in the morning and think, where is she really going? He'd see her on the phone, speaking low, and wonder, who is that? He didn't mean to. He hated himself for it. But the doubt was there. And Sarah felt it. She could always feel it. The way he looked at her a half second too long. The way he got quiet when she came home late. The little questions that weren't really questions. Long day, huh? Where were you again? After 8 years of protecting this man from his own mother, of swallowing every insult so he wouldn't have to choose, Sarah watched him start to doubt her. And that broke something in her that Barbara's words never could. One night it all came to a head. Sarah came home late. There'd been a big meeting, an important one, the kind she couldn't talk about yet. And Michael was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, waiting. "Where were you?" he said. "Work. I told you. The big project. The project you can't tell me anything about." "Michael, my mom thinks you're hiding something." His voice cracked a little. "And Sarah, God help me, lately I've started to wonder if she's right." That was it. That was the moment. 8 years. 8 years of taking it. And now the one person she trusted, The one person she did all of it for was looking at her like she was a stranger. Like his mother was right. Like maybe she really was what Barbara always said. Trash. Sarah didn't yell. She never did. She just went upstairs, quiet as anything, and she pulled a small bag out of the closet, and she started to pack. A few shirts, her toothbrush, the blue dress she wore the first day she met his family. And then she walked out to her car, sat down behind the wheel, and just stopped. She didn't start the engine. She just sat there in the dark driveway, both hands in her lap, staring at nothing. And for the first time in 8 years, Sarah cried. Really cried. The kind that shakes your shoulders. The kind you hold in for years until it finally breaks loose all at once. She thought about her father. She thought about that empty church. She thought, maybe Barbara was right. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I never did. Maybe I should just go and let them all believe whatever they want. If you've ever sat in a car like that, ready to leave, not sure you have the strength to stay, you know exactly how heavy that moment is. If this story is hitting home for you, take a second and let me know down in the comments. Sometimes just saying it out loud helps. Because Sarah was that close to giving up. And then her phone lit up, an email. The soft blue glow filled the dark car, and through her tears, Sarah looked down and read the subject line. Acquisition close, Meridian Office Group, CEO sign-off required. She stared at it. Meridian Office Group, the company, Barbara's company, the one she'd bragged about for 25 years, the one Barbara said couldn't function without her. And right there, right under the subject line, was one word that stopped Sarah's tears cold. CEO. Because that email wasn't sent to some office worker. It wasn't sent to someone who answers phones. It was sent to the one person who had the power to sign off on the whole thing. The one person at the very top. It was sent to Sarah. She wiped her eyes. She read it again. And slowly something came back into her face. Not anger, not sadness, purpose. Because Sarah remembered who she was. She remembered what her father built with his own 2 hands, out of nothing, in a little town nobody had heard of. She remembered the promise she made him. Don't tell people who you are, show them. And she remembered why she'd stayed quiet all these years. Not because she was weak, but because she was waiting for the right moment. The moment when the truth would matter most. Sarah closed her eyes, and in the dark she whispered, "Dad, I hope you're watching this." Then she picked up her bag. And she carried it back inside. She didn't leave. She set the bag by the door. She set her keys on the counter. And she stood in the quiet kitchen for a long moment, thinking. She was done being pushed, done being doubted, done swallowing it. But she wasn't going to do what Barbara would do. She wasn't going to scream or throw things or blow up her whole family in a rage. No, Sarah was going to do it her way, the quiet way, the right way, with the truth and with proof and with patience. And it all started on Monday, because on Monday, the acquisition would close. On Monday, Sarah would officially own the company where Barbara had worked for 25 years. On Monday, Sarah would sit down and read every file, every record, every folder in that company. And that's when she'd find it. The thing hidden deep in Barbara's employee record. The thing Barbara had done to someone else. Someone young. Someone who couldn't fight back. Something Barbara thought no one important would ever see. But now the most important person of all was about to see everything. Sarah looked at her keys on the counter. And she said one thing, soft and sure, to the empty kitchen. "Monday," she said. "Monday, everything changes." And she turned off the light. What Sarah found in those files 2 days later wasn't just mean. It was the kind of thing that ends careers. The kind of thing that turns a whole family upside down. And it explains everything about who Barbara really is. That's next, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Go ahead and subscribe so you're there when Sarah opens that folder. Monday morning came, and here's the truth Sarah had been holding all these years. the truth nobody in that family ever guessed. Sarah wasn't a poor girl who answered phones. Sarah was the boss. Not just any boss. She was the founder and CEO of her own company. A company she'd built quietly over many years from almost nothing. The same way her father built his, with hard work and long nights and never once bragging about it. Her company had grown big enough to buy other companies, and a few months back, when a struggling firm called Meridian Office Group came up for sale, Sarah's team took a look at the numbers and said, "This is a good deal, let's buy it." Sarah had signed off without a second thought. Just business, just another company. She didn't know. She truly didn't know, not until later, that Meridian Office Group was the exact same company Barbara had worked at for 25 years. Now here's the thing that had kept Sarah hidden all this time. At work, Sarah didn't go by Williams. That was her married name. At the office, she went by her maiden name, Sarah Rodriguez. So to everyone at Meridian, the new owner was some powerful woman named Sarah Rodriguez, a name Barbara had never heard, a name that meant nothing to her. Barbara had spent 8 years insulting a nobody named Sarah Williams, and she had no idea that nobody and the powerful new owner named Sarah Rodriguez were the very same person. Isn't that something? The woman she called trash owned the very chair Barbara sat in. But Sarah wasn't thinking about revenge that Monday. Not yet. She sat down at her big desk that morning with a cup of coffee and a stack of files. Employee records. Every person who worked at her new company. She wanted to know her people. That was Sarah's way. She read every single file herself. And that's when she found it. One folder, thicker than the rest. The name on the tab? Barbara Williams, office manager, 25 years. Sarah's coffee went cold in her hand. She almost closed it. She almost passed it to someone else. Because this was personal now, and she knew it. But something told her to look. So she opened the folder. And what she read made her sick to her stomach. It wasn't just that Barbara was rude. Sarah already knew that. This was worse, much worse. Inside that folder were complaints, formal complaints, from other workers, about Barbara. There was a young woman, her name was Jessica, just 24 years old, new to the company. And according to these files, Barbara had made that poor girl's life a living nightmare. Barbara cut Jessica's hours whenever she felt like it. Not for any real reason, just to punish her, just to remind her who was in charge. One week, Jessica would have full hours, the next week, half. The girl could barely pay her rent. And it got worse. Jessica was smart. She'd come up with a new filing system that saved the company thousands of dollars. It was a great idea. Everyone said so. And Barbara took the credit. Stood up in a meeting and called it her own. Got a bonus for it. While Jessica sat in the back of the room and said nothing because she was scared. Scared that if she spoke up, Barbara would cut her hours to 0. Sarah read that page twice. Her hands were shaking. Because she knew that feeling. She knew exactly what it was like to have someone powerful stand over you. To be too scared to speak. To sit quiet in the back of the room while someone crueler took what was yours. That was Sarah's whole life with Barbara. And now here was a young girl living the very same thing. At Sarah's own company. Under Sarah's own roof. If that makes you angry, if you've ever watched a bully take credit for someone else's work and get away with it, I understand. Take a second and tell me in the comments, because this is the part where things finally start to turn. There was one more page, and it was the worst one, an unsigned note from another worker too afraid to give their name. It said money had gone missing from the office fund, the little cash fund everyone chipped into for birthdays and coffee and holiday parties. A few $100s, gone. And the note said, plain as day, that they'd seen Barbara take it, more than once. Barbara, stealing from the office party fund, from her own co-workers. The woman who called Sarah trash was a thief. Sarah sat back in her chair. For a long moment, she just stared out the window at the city below. And here's what makes Sarah different. Here's why you root for her. She had the power now. Real power. She could have picked up the phone right then and had Barbara fired on the spot, walked out with a box, no goodbye, no chance to explain. She could have called Michael and told him every ugly thing his mother had done. She could have made Barbara feel as small as Barbara had made her feel for 8 long years. Nobody would have blamed her. But that's not who Sarah was. She thought about her father again. She thought about that rule he taught her. Let your actions do the talking. The loud ones are always the emptiest. Sarah wasn't going to be loud. She wasn't going to be cruel. Because if she did this out of anger, if she blew it all up in a rage, then she'd be no better than Barbara. No, she was going to do it right, with proof, with fairness. She was going to let the truth stand up on its own 2 feet, in front of everyone, and let Barbara face what she'd done. So Sarah made a decision. She picked up her pen and she wrote out a plan, quiet and careful. First, she would gather every complaint, every record, every missing dollar, all of it, neat and organized so no one could call it a lie. Second, she would find Jessica, that poor, scared girl, and she would make sure Jessica finally got what she'd earned. And third, this was the big one, Sarah scheduled a meeting, an all-staff meeting. The whole company, first thing next Monday morning, a meet the new owner meeting. Everyone had to be there, no exceptions. She typed up the invite herself, and at the bottom of the list of names, she added one more. B. Williams, office manager, attendance required. She read it one more time, then she hit send. Across town, Barbara was in her kitchen making dinner when her phone buzzed. She wiped her hands and picked it up. A work email. A meeting invite for next Monday. From the new owner. From S. Rodriguez, Chief Executive Officer. Barbara frowned at the little screen. Rodriguez, she muttered to herself. Who in the world is Rodriguez? She'd never heard the name, not once in 25 years. Some new boss, she figured. Probably wanted to shake everyone's hand and give a big speech. Well, Barbara thought, straightening up, maybe it was her chance. New owners meant new chances. Maybe this Rodriguez woman would finally see how important she was. Maybe she'd even get that promotion she always felt she deserved. She smiled to herself and set the phone down. She had no idea who she was about to meet. No idea that every cruel thing she'd ever done, the stolen credit, the missing money, the girl she bullied, was sitting in a neat folder on that new owner's desk. And no idea that the nobody she called trash was about to be sitting at the head of that room, waiting for her. Monday was coming. That meeting, the moment Barbara walks through that door and sees who's really sitting at the head of the table, is everything this whole story has been building toward. It's next. Subscribe right now so you're there for it, because Barbara's face when she realizes the truth is a moment you will not want to miss. Monday morning, Barbara woke up early. She was excited, if you can believe it. She put on her very best outfit, a cream-colored blazer she saved for special days, her pearls. She did her hair up nice. She even practiced her smile in the mirror. Because today, she was going to meet the new owner, and Barbara had a plan of her own. She was going to charm this Rodriguez woman. She was going to walk in there, shake her hand, and make sure the new boss knew exactly how important Barbara Williams was. 25 years, the backbone of the whole place. Maybe, just maybe, this was the day she finally got that promotion. She drove to work, humming to herself. She had no idea she was driving straight into the moment that would end everything. The conference room was packed. Every worker in the building was there, just like the invite said. Rows of chairs, coffee in the corner, everybody chatting low, wondering what the new owner would be like. Barbara walked in like she owned the place. She found a seat near the front, of course. She smoothed her blazer. She looked around at the younger workers and felt that familiar little glow of importance. She spotted Jessica across the room, that quiet girl. Barbara gave her a cold little nod, the kind that said, "Remember who's in charge here." Jessica looked away. Barbara smiled to herself. Some things never change. Then the door at the front of the room opened, and in walked the new owner, At first, Barbara didn't understand what she was seeing. Her brain just couldn't put it together. She saw a woman in a sharp navy suit, confident, calm, walking to the front of the room like she'd done it 1,000 times. And the woman's face was familiar, too familiar. Barbara's smile started to fade, slowly. Her mind was scrambling. Where do I know her from? Why does she look like... And then the woman turned to face the room, and Barbara's whole world stopped. It was Sarah, her daughter-in-law, the poor girl, the nobody, the one she called trash at her own dinner table, in front of the whole family. Sarah, standing at the head of the room, as the owner, as the boss, as the person who now signed every single paycheck in that building, including Barbara's. All the color drained out of Barbara's face. Her mouth fell open. Her hand went to her pearls. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. And maybe she had. The ghost of every cruel thing she'd ever said. Somebody in the room whispered, "That's her? That's the new owner?" Sarah stood tall, calm as still water. She looked out at all those faces, and then, just for a second, her eyes found Barbara's. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. Sarah didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She just gave a small, polite nod, the same kind Barbara had given Jessica a moment ago, and said, in a warm and even voice, "Good morning, Barbara." 2 words, that's all. But those 2 words landed like thunder, because everyone in that room heard it. Everyone heard that the new owner knew Barbara by name, knew her personally, and Barbara, proud, loud Barbara, couldn't make a single sound come out of her mouth. If you've been waiting this whole story for that moment, that look on Barbara's face, go ahead and type 1 word in the comments right now. Just 1 word, justice, because this is the moment it finally starts. Sarah turned to the room and began. She welcomed everyone. She thanked them for their hard work. She talked about the kind of company she wanted to build. A fair one, an honest one. A place where the people who did the work got the credit for the work. And then, gently, she picked up a folder from the table. "Before we go on," Sarah said, "I've spent this past week reading through our records, getting to know all of you, and I found some things I think we need to talk about, out in the open. Because at this company, from today on, the truth matters." The room went dead silent. Barbara's stomach dropped. Sarah opened the folder, and calmly, without anger, she began to read. She talked about the complaints. Not by shouting, not by pointing, just facts, plain and simple. She talked about a manager who cut a young worker's hours as punishment, who took credit for someone else's hard work in front of the whole team, who collected a bonus for an idea that wasn't hers. She never said Barbara's name. She didn't have to. Everyone in that room already knew. Heads slowly turned. Eyes moved toward the front row, toward the woman in the cream blazer clutching her pearls. Barbara felt every one of those looks like a burn on her skin. And then Sarah said the last part, the part about the missing money, the office fund, the birthday and coffee fund that everyone chipped into. Gone, a little at a time. Taken by someone people trusted. That was too much for Barbara. She shot to her feet. "Now wait just a minute," she snapped. Her voice was shaking. "I don't know what lies you've been told, but I have given 25 years to this company. 25 years. You can't just walk in here and..." "Barbara." Sarah's voice was quiet, but it cut right through. "I'm not asking you to defend yourself. Not here. Not in front of everyone." She closed the folder softly. "I'd never do that to a person, not even to you." And something about the way she said it, so calm, so kind, even now, made Barbara's anger crumble into fear. Because here's the twist Sarah didn't say out loud. The thing she'd figured out reading those files. Barbara wasn't stealing because she was greedy. Barbara was broke. Sarah had seen it in the records, late payments, money troubles. All those years, Barbara bragged about being so important, so successful, looking down on Sarah as a working girl. Barbara had been drowning in debt the whole time. That fancy blazer, those pearls, it was all a show, a costume. Barbara clung to this job, clung to feeling important because it was the only thing holding her up. The loudest one in the room was the emptiest, just like Sarah's father always said. And now the whole thing was falling apart, right in front of everybody she'd ever tried to impress. Barbara stood there, frozen, her face gone gray. 25 years of pride, cracking like thin ice. Sarah looked at her, and for just a moment, something crossed her face that wasn't anger at all. It almost looked like pity. "That's enough for now," Sarah said gently to the room. "Everyone, thank you. Please get back to your day. We'll talk more soon." Chairs scraped. People filed out, whispering, glancing back. Jessica walked past the front of the room, and Sarah caught her eye and gave her the smallest, kindest smile. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. She didn't even know why yet, but somehow she knew things were about to change. Soon the big room was empty. Empty except for two women. Sarah, standing calm at the head of the table, and Barbara, still frozen in the front row, holding her pearls, her whole world in pieces around her feet. For a long moment, neither one said a word. Then Sarah picked up her folder. She looked at the woman who called her trash, the woman who skipped her father's funeral, the woman who'd spent 8 years trying to make her feel like nothing. And she said, soft and steady, "I'd like to see you in my office, Barbara. Alone." Barbara's legs were shaking as she stood up. What happens behind that office door, what Sarah says to the woman who spent 8 years tearing her down, is the ending you've been waiting for. And it is not what you think. Sarah does something nobody sees coming. That's the final part. Subscribe right now so you don't miss how this story ends. The walk to Sarah's office was the longest walk of Barbara's life. It was just down the hall, maybe 20 steps, but for Barbara, it felt like a mile. Her heels clicked slow on the tile. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every worker she passed looked away, the way people do when they don't want to see someone fall apart. Sarah opened the office door and held it. "Have a seat, Barbara." Barbara sat. She perched on the very edge of the chair, stiff and small. This woman who'd always taken up so much space at every dinner table now looked like she was trying to disappear. Sarah sat down across from her. She folded her hands on the desk, and for a moment she just looked at the woman who'd spent 8 years trying to break her. Barbara couldn't take the silence. The words came pouring out. "Whatever you're going to do, just do it," she said, her voice cracked. "Fire me, humiliate me, tell Michael, tell the whole family. I know that's why you brought me in here." Her eyes filled up. "You want to watch me beg? After everything I said to you, go ahead, I deserve it." Sarah didn't say anything right away. She slid the folder across the desk, gently. "Open it," she said. Barbara's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were the complaints, the records, the proof of the missing money, all of it, neat and clear. And then, at the very back, one more page, Barbara's own bank records, the late payments, the debt, the truth she'd hidden from everyone for years. Barbara stared at that last page, and the fight just drained right out of her. "How did you?" she whispered. "I read every file," Sarah said softly. "That's how I found out what you did to Jessica, and that's how I found out what was really going on with you." She paused. "You've been in trouble for a long time, Barbara. Real trouble, and nobody knew." Barbara's chin started to quiver, and then the proud woman, the woman in the cream blazer and the pearls, put her face in her hands and broke down. Right there in that office. Years of pretending, all of it crashing down at once. "I lost everything," Barbara wept. "After my husband passed, there were bills I couldn't pay, debt I couldn't dig out of. And I was so ashamed. So I pretended. I acted like I had it all together, like I was better than everyone. Because if I stopped pretending, even for 1 second, I'd have to admit the truth." She looked up, tears streaming, that I was scared and broke and alone. Sarah sat very still. "And that money," Barbara went on, her voice breaking, "the office fund, I told myself I'd pay it back. I always told myself that. It was never much, and I always meant to. But I never did. And I took Jessica's idea because I was terrified of losing this job. This job was the only thing that made me feel like I was still somebody." She wiped her face. "I know that doesn't make it right. Nothing makes it right." The room was quiet, and here's where you find out who Sarah really is. Because she had every reason in the world to end Barbara, right there. 8 years of insults. A black dress at her wedding, an empty church at her father's funeral. The word trash said out loud in front of the whole family. Sarah could have fired her. She could have called Michael. She could have made sure Barbara left that building with nothing, the same way Barbara made her feel like nothing. But Sarah thought about her father. She thought about the man who built something from nothing and never once looked down on a soul. The man who taught her that the loud ones are the emptiest. The man who would have told her that anybody can tear a person down, but it takes something more to lift one up. And Sarah made her choice. "I'm not going to fire you, Barbara," she said quietly. Barbara's head snapped up. "What?" "But things are going to change," Sarah went on. "Starting today. First, you're going to pay back every dollar of that office fund. All of it. I'll take a little out of each check until it's square, fair and honest." Barbara nodded fast, wiping her eyes. "Second," Sarah said, "you're going to apologize to Jessica in front of the team, and Jessica is getting your job. She earned it. That filing idea was hers, and she's going to be recognized for it, the way she should have been all along." "But then, what happens to me?" Barbara whispered. "You'll stay on," Sarah said, "in a smaller role, with a fair wage, enough to get back on your feet if you're willing to work honestly for it." She leaned forward. "It's a second chance, Barbara, a real one, more than you gave anybody else. The question is whether you're going to take it." Barbara stared at her, and something broke open in her face that had been shut for years, because in that moment, she finally understood. The trash she'd looked down on all this time had just shown her more kindness than Barbara had ever shown anyone in her whole life. "Why?" Barbara choked out. "After everything I did to you, why would you do this?" Sarah stood up. She walked around the desk, and she put a gentle hand on the older woman's shoulder. "Because tearing you down wouldn't fix a single thing," she said. "And because my father taught me something you never learned. Real strength doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to make anybody feel small." She squeezed her shoulder softly. "I hope, someday, you'll believe that too." Barbara covered Sarah's hand with her own, and she cried. But this time, they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of something new. If that got you right in the heart, if you believe kindness really is stronger than cruelty, take just a second and let me know down in the comments. It means more than you know. Things changed after that. Jessica got her promotion. She stood up in front of the whole team, hardly believing it, and Sarah made sure everyone knew the good ideas had been hers all along. That scared girl who used to sit in the back of the room, she walked a little taller now, and she never forgot the woman who saw her when nobody else would. Barbara paid back every dollar. And slowly, quietly, she started to become someone different. Softer, humbler. She said please and thank you, like she meant it. She started being kind, and she found out it felt a whole lot better than being important. And Michael, sweet, gentle Michael. When he finally learned the whole truth, when he learned who his wife really was and everything she'd carried in silence for 8 long years, he wept. He held her tight and said the words she'd waited so long to hear. "I should have stood up for you a long time ago," he said. "I'm so sorry. I'll never doubt you again." And he never did. A few weeks later, the family gathered for dinner. The same dining room, the same long table. And Sarah walked in carrying a homemade apple pie, just like before. Only this time, when Sarah set it down, Barbara stood up from her chair. The whole table went quiet the way it did that terrible night. But Barbara didn't say anything cruel. Instead, she walked over to Sarah, and in a soft, shaking voice in front of the whole family, she said, "Sarah, thank you for everything." Sarah looked at her for a long moment, and then she smiled. A real, warm smile. She picked up a knife, cut the very first slice of that apple pie, and set it gently on Barbara's plate. "Cinnamon," Sarah said. "Michael's favorite, and this time the whole family ate. Sometimes the people who yell the loudest are hiding the emptiest lives, and sometimes the quiet ones, the ones the world calls nothing, are the strongest of us all." Sarah never had to shout to prove her worth. She just lived it. And in the end, that spoke louder than any word Barbara ever said. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If Sarah's journey touched your heart, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments. Would you have shown Barbara mercy or not? I read every single one. And I'll see you in the next story, right here at Stories of Pain and Joy.